and your wallet.
Nick, give him your wallet.
If it shakes the room, that's how you know it's you, yeah. Oh, yeah. You got a truth tucked deep in your chest, heartbeat tapping out, say it, confess. Crowd might stare, let them do what they do. They never held a fire living in you. Let your voice be heard, say every single word, from the low notes to the sky. Throw your hands up high. Let your voice be heard, loud, clear, undeterred. If it shakes the room, that's how you know it's you, yeah. Speak up, name your dream out loud. Stand up, you're the leader of this crowd. One spark, one shout, watch the silence melt. That power in your mouth is the truest thing you felt. Let your voice be heard, say every single word, from the low notes to the sky. Throw your hands up high. Let your voice be heard, loud, clear, undeterred. If it shakes the room, that's how you know it's.
Welcome. Once again, to Let Your Voice Be Heard Talk Radio. My name is Cloyd Holmes. I am the host of Let Your Voice Be Heard Talk Radio. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and I want to welcome you for those who haven't been here before. It looks like everybody here. I see a new person here, but for the most part, all you guys, welcome back. I knew you'd be back. We have again awesome. Awesome guest tonight, man. You guys know him, man. Dr. Mike Armour, man. You probably one of the most intriguing, intelligent guests that I have interviewed ever, and that's taking nothing away from our other guests. Well, Mike, you are something special. You are something special. For those who don't know, Mike is a C-suite leadership coach. Mike has been through a lot. He's written 13 books. Mike has coached over 850 execs. Mike gave us a overview kind of one of the most, well, probably the most daunting leadership challenge that he ever had. Was he shared with us was taking a school that was on the brink of bankruptcy and bringing it back to success, so to speak. Mike has been through so much and has so many experiences, and his adventures are so vast that last week, as I looked at the show, because I go back and look at it, I looked at the show and I said that getting into everything you've been through, Mike, and your adventures across the world and Ukraine and Russia and all, we ended up, I think, not off of topic, but because we ended up in a history lesson. I took a history class last week. I found out things that I never knew. And these things were because of the things that you've been through, Mike, and we got into that, and people were very interested in those things. So we started asking questions about your adventures and stuff. And for whatever reason, I mean, we got. I think we were off of the leadership portion of it. That and I was going to say what is your expertise, but you're an expert in so many things. But now we're focusing on the leadership part of your life, which is now and which has been for years. So we're going to kind of reel it back, because when we were talking about leadership, we were talking about these things, you were dropping so many jewels, man, that I've written down so much stuff. There's so much in it, I don't know, Mike, not just for corporations and companies, but a lot of these principles are for everyday life. A lot of this stuff that you teach and that you show It's a lot. There's so much in it that I have two notebooks full of notes from what you have said. Now, in the last episode, Mike, we talked about how you helped schools in Russia and Ukraine completely reconstructing training following the collapse of communism. Share us tonight, Mike. Share us your thoughts on the importance of character, especially as it relates to leadership.
Okay, all right, that's a good place to start. And because the focus that I had in these schools was not on their entire curriculum, but rather on their character training, their character curriculum, which is a mainstay of every school and university in Russia, Ukraine, and other nations that were part of the Soviet Union. And that's not a new thing. That goes back for centuries, that they have tried to make the core of character training for young people the classroom, not the home. And there are a number of things that contribute to that strategy, but it is anchored in their culture, and teachers think of character training as one of their 2 or 3 core responsibilities. And therefore, when they no longer were under the thumb of the communists and had to teach communist ideology as character, and they could come back and really examine character in its fullest dimensions, that's where I had the opportunity to come in and build some strong relationships and to build some long-standing working partnerships that have continued to some extent even down to today. The reason character is important to me and important to leadership is because there are numerous studies done by very reputable institutions that have concluded that somewhere between 70 and 80% of a leader's effectiveness, the effectiveness that contributes to a leader's success, is either directly or indirectly attributable to character. We put our emphasis on the skills, the capabilities, the performance record of top-level leaders. But at every level of leadership, from the woman who's running a Cub Scout den in her neighborhood, all the way up to CEOs of international organizations, the common denominator that you find over and over and over is that long-term enduring success and the building of organizations and institutions that do endure themselves is attributable to the quality of character in the person of those who are the core leaders at its founding and in its continuation. That being said, we at one time recognized that ourselves. If you go back and study the history of what we today call leadership training, it has only been called that for just about 100 years. Well, not even quite that. Before that, we thought of it as administration or management. We didn't use the word leadership much. But if you go back to the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries in the English-speaking world and look at how they trained people to be leaders, what they did was to study the biographies of great leaders dating all the way back to the Greeks and Romans. And they studied the quality of character that these men, usually men, there were some women who were in that number, but not too many in the ancient and medieval worlds. But they looked at the quality of their character and encouraged readers to model their life around those exemplary characteristics that they saw in great leaders. That began to change between the 2 world wars. We began to shift in our emphasis on leadership to performance-based assessments, metrics. Are you meeting your numbers? Are you hitting your goals? Can you get an organization to a point of its most promising potential. And character sort of got parked on the sideline. It is only in the last 30 years, really, beginning shortly before I began my firm in 2001, that we came back and started focusing on character again. Now, it's still not as prominent as it needs to be, especially given the fact that, as I said, reputable authorities will accredit character with 70 to 80% of a leader's success. But our business schools at least are addressing it now in their graduate programs, their MBA programs and such. And that is being done in coupling with bringing courses on leadership into the business schools. We still don't elevate leadership, in fact, to the degree that we elevate management. We have MBAs in management. It's hard to find a master's degree in leadership. Everybody says it's important. And when leadership becomes important, the quality of the leader in terms of character and courage and being able to mobilize people and motivate them by means of example becomes very, very central to the dialogue. And so that's where character is coming back into the picture. And I can tell you that in my own personal experience, the worst promotions I've ever made were promotions where I ignored a character flaw that I had seen in a person, but I thought it was in their past. And what happens when you move people who do not have strength of character into higher positions of leadership, the pressures of that higher position bring out their fears and their anxieties. And here's what we do when we're under pressure. We can think of our behavior as like an atom with electrons in orbit around it. If I've got a flaw in my character or a flaw in my treatment of people, and I become convinced of that, and I decide I'm going to change. I'm going to really put my effort into treating people better, no longer giving in to that flaw. I can do that, but it takes a lot of energy. It's not natural to me yet. It's not my habitual way of doing things. So I have to put a lot of energy into that electron, if you would, that I'm trying to improve on. But if you think about your physics classes and general science classes in high school, when you pump more energy into an electron, it goes into a higher orbit. It doesn't go faster. It can't go any faster. It's already traveling at the speed of light. So what it does is you pump energy into it, it goes into a higher orbit, or shell, as they're sometimes referred to. Now, just the reverse happens. If you drain energy out of an electron, it falls back to a lower shell. So let's take this leader who has decided I'm going to be better at the way I treat people, the way I respond to conflict, the way I deal with frustration. And they pump energy in and they get into a higher orbit. And then we put them in a position where the pressure starts building, the ambiguity in the decision-making becomes greater, the anxiety begins to build. That's draining energy. And where do they get that energy? By falling back into the old way of doing things. And so the old flaws have a way of showing up when we move people into senior leadership positions, unless they have genuinely made the new way of doing things their instinctive habit.
I see a question here, but I'm writing down stuff. I want to know, Mike, give me some of the character flaws, the most prevalent ones, the ones that you see all the time. Because I want to be a leader. If I want to be a leader, I want to look into myself and say, well, what flaws, character flaws, would hinder me in leadership? So give me some of the ones that stand out the most to you.
if I had to start with the one that's most pivotal, it's lack of courage. The number one most important quality for every leader to have is courage. And if you think about the history of leadership, you can understand that. When we go back to the early history of mankind, the first millennia of our existence down to very modern times, when an army went to battle, where was the leader? He was in the very front row. He was saying, "Follow me." He was exposing himself to the frontal attack of the enemy. And so in the ancient world, someone who did not have courage would never be elevated to the position of being a leader, because on a battlefield with yelling and screaming and moaning and wails, it's very difficult for the leader's voice to be heard. The leader's got to be right there with the troops in the middle of the battle in order to keep them coordinated and keep them pressing forward as they should. Now, once we got to the point that we had guns, the troops didn't have to be so close together. They could stand, as we think of the Civil War, for instance, with Union forces on one side of a field and Confederate forces on the other side, lined up in military formations and firing rifle shots at one another. But where was the leader? He was on horseback, riding up and down behind the ranks, because he had to quickly move to one part of the formation and give them orders, and quickly get to another part and give them orders. And so he had to be on horse. Well, if you're on a horse, you are towering above the rest of the people. Guess who is the number one target for the guys on the other side? The guy on the horse.
That's right.
If we can get rid of him, we've scored a victory right there. And so historically, courage has had to be a core competency and a core characteristic of those who are in leadership.
Wow.
And what I see is people getting into all kinds of ethical and moral or poor decision-making motives because they did not have the courage to stand up to criticism, to push back, to unpopularity. That part of their personality made them vulnerable to being manipulated. And so when you say what are some of the characteristics, courage has to be number one. Now then, here's the interesting thing. Courage suggests tremendous self-confidence and strength of ego. But the other quality that I would say is almost equally important in today's world is humility. You've got to be able to couple courageous action with an humble approach to life, in which you don't give in to the impulse, once you are seen as a strong leader, to exploit that reputation by advancing self-interest at the expense of others, or becoming oblivious to the needs and hurts of others. So we have no great number of leaders who exemplify humility in American culture, because we celebrate winning.
Right.
We don't celebrate who came in number two. We only celebrate who came in number one. And so our culture says, humble, yeah, that's nice, but let's win. That's the priority. Humility is nice, but winning is nicer. And yet, in today's world, people respond to leaders who are genuinely humble and transparent because they see authenticity there. And one of the greatest problems we're having in a world of deep fakes, and people asking all the time, is that real or is that AI, is authenticity. And as the AI phenomenon becomes more and more ensconced in the way we do business, having people who are humble and therefore authentic, that's going to give them great clout as a leader that they might not otherwise have.
but that's also going to be a rarity here in a minute. I mean, it's a rarity anyway, but now with, as you just said, the AI phenomenon going on, that those authentic people like that will be rare to find.
Right.
You have to be able to to gauge who's who, and who's really authentic.
Right.
You said something about skills before meant more than character.
Well, let me tell you something else that has come to the fore just within the last 2 years. And this is not so much character as it is personality. And there's a difference between those two. We're born with personality. We develop character. We're not born with character. It has to be bred into us. But one of the things that has come to the fore in the last 2 years is the world of business is changing so fast and has become so complex, and disruption happens so quickly and can come from so many different directions that the top CEOs in the largest companies are now looking for something in people that they bring to the top that they've never looked for before, and that's creativity. In the last 2 years, when researchers do surveys of CEOs globally and say, what are you looking for in the people that you promote to the top? Creativity has come out of nowhere. And in some surveys, it's the number one quality, because you need courage and creativity to deal with the uncertainty that the world is throwing at every business of any size in today's reality. And so that's an interesting one that is, as rare as humility. People who are really creative, being able to be successful enough with the creativity that they get the street cred that allows them to be promoted to the top. That's the problem. Creative people are not seen as potential C-suite executives down in the ranks, and so they don't tend to be moved up the ranks as much as the people who hit the numbers, who get the bottom line. And so it's difficult to find those creative people who are ready for a C-suite role.
So how do you advise the top execs concerning finding with the creativity, the creative person? How do you advise the top execs, because of what they're looking for? Because you said now today this means more than character, or humbleness. So, and I know you're big on you believe in character,
right,
and courage and things like that. So when these new, so to speak, ideas of top execs come with the creativity aspect, how do you handle that, Mike?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the interview process. Instead of letting the interview process turn into a recitation of the candidate's resume, start asking some questions. What's the most creative solution that you've ever come up with for a problem that was really pivotal for your company? See how they answer. Some people will give you a blank stare. They just told you, well, I'm not the guy for this job. But it has to do with how we structure our interviews to begin to surface that. And then once someone shows that they do have a streak of genuine creativity, be prepared with a couple of hypothetical questions. Okay, let me give you a situation that we're facing. Boom, boom, boom. Creatively, how would you find a new way of dealing with that that's not just a tried and true formula that we all hear about in business school? What's a new way of thinking about that? What's a new way of approaching that? And so it's using the interview process, both on the part of the CEO doing the interviewing and the people who have screened the person before that person is brought to the CEO, that's going to help us surface these people, because our HR systems are not geared right now to surface the really creative people who may otherwise be easily overlooked in the promotion system.
Wow. I'm gonna.
And one of the problems they face is that creative people often come up with solutions that no one else understands the importance of, and so they're seen as sort of troublemakers or a bit weird. They are not seen for having a gift that could really be useful if channeled in the right direction.
I see. Thank you for that, Mike. I see a couple of questions here. Okay. One I think you may have answered already. I'm not sure. It says, what are the character traits to look for when considering someone for a new management position?
Okay. One of the things I've not touched on, and it's right there alongside character, it is in fact a part of character, is integrity. Integrity and accountability. A lot of people, we use the word character and integrity interchangeably sometimes. If I say, he really doesn't have much character, you would hear me saying he doesn't have integrity, because in popular speech, we often treat them as though they're the same. But integrity has to do with values. What values do I espouse? How ardently do I believe in them? And how thoroughly do I live according to them? If there's a mismatch at any point in that sequence, then we start saying that person really doesn't have integrity. But character involves not only values as integrity does, but it involves such things as, how do I deal with frustration? How do I deal with disappointment? How do I deal with people who confront me? How do I deal with people who question my judgment on things? That's coming from our character. And so you need character, but as a subcomponent of exemplary character, we need the integrity to know what our values are, why we believe in them, and we've disciplined ourselves to live consistently with those beliefs and those values, and people can see it. People can sniff hypocrisy pretty quickly. They can see whether we really walk our talk. Mm-hmm. So integrity is one of the things I'm looking for in a manager. Second is this a person who can move from being one of the boys, one of the gals, to being a manager? Because as long as I'm one of the boys, one of the gals down in the worker bee world, it's us versus them being management and the company. Once I put on a supervisor or management hat, now then I'm one of them. Mm-hmm. And my temptation is going to be to continue to think like I did when I was one of the boys or one of the gals, and to want to keep myself in their good graces. And when that starts happening, I don't have the courage, the backbone, the determination to hold people accountable. And before long, I shipwreck my own career in management because the lack of accountability will lead in time to a lack of productivity, which no company is going to promote a manager who's not able to keep things on a productive track.
Right. That makes sense. Because if I'm one of the boys, and now I do what you guys do, right, and now all of a sudden I'm not one of the boys anymore. I'm part of the company. Now, how can I tell you, hey, you can't do that? When, hey, man, you did this with us. You should do this with us. You know what this is.
I learned it from you when you were one of us.
Correct. So, yeah, I got that. Thank you for that, Mike. I see, Karen, you have something in here. Says, what is your suggestion for leaders of an older generation? Lead a different of an older generation. Karen, give your question, because I'm not sure how you wrote this.
Okay, so basically, everything that you said, I totally agree with. However, with the generations now, it's so different from, I just had this discussion earlier today in a leadership meeting, that And I thought of you because trust was one of the points that they were talking about. But I want your perspective on, if you don't mind, that when you come from an older generation and the way we did things years ago and the way we led years ago, it's not the same today. Like you said, creativity is very important. We look for those types of things now. We look for that now. But years ago, the way I led is not the way I have to lead today. I had to totally pivot because I was not getting the results, the productivity that I needed, and I didn't understand why. And I was hitting a brick wall to the point where I was like, oh, this person has to go because they can't do the job. It wasn't so much that they couldn't do the job. It was, I was not coaching correctly. I wasn't giving them the tools to be successful because I didn't understand this generation and how they do things. So when I have conversations with leadership now, the folks in my generation or close to my generation, they're dealing with the same types of issues. So what would be your suggestion on leading the different generation, because they're, like you said, managers are different than leaders, right? Mm-hmm. Managers are different. So what would be your suggestion on how to lead those managers so that the department is successful and it's a win-win situation? We're actually getting what we need, but understanding how to get what we need.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. It does, and it is a genuine challenge. You've done a good job of describing what everybody's feeling, even if they don't articulate it quite as distinctly as you did. The advantage of working with older people and trying to get them to understand a different mode of management is that many of them are grandparents. And one of the characteristics of grandparents is that they are completely different with their grandchildren than they were with their own children, in part because they've learned from some of their mistakes. But a young girl drove this home in a congregation that I was the minister for in San Jose, California for years. And we were one of the first places in the United States to have a day that we called Grandparents' Day. Now then, that's, a lot of places do that, but we were one of just a handful of places where we celebrated grandparents on a particular day. And we asked our elementary age kids to write out their definition of what a grandparent is. And in particular, ask it about a grandmother. What is a grandmother? And one little girl, a little 6-year-old, answered, grandmothers are the people who have time for you. And I thought, wow, what wisdom she's got, because we make time for our grandkids. We listen to our grandkids. We're interested in their small victories. That's a metaphor for how we have to work across the generations now. I'm not saying that the younger generations are infantile, but I am saying that they are looking for people who will manage them by giving them the same kind of time and interest and concern, and who will listen the way grandparents do. So the older generation has some models as to the kind of leader you need to be just based on their own family experience. Now, you got to be careful in how you frame that, because you can come across stepping into the pothole that I was trying to not step in myself, of saying, well, these younger generations are just childlike. No, that's not what I'm saying. But they have been raised in a different culture. They have been raised in a culture which was not safe. When I was 10, 11, 12 years of age, I lived in a small town where no one locked their front doors. If the front door was locked, it was because you were out of town for several days. The kids in my neighborhood had a hide-and-seek game in the summer where we would assemble on our big front porch, and 30 or so of us would play hide-and-seek, and the There were no fences in the backyards, so you could hide behind any house anywhere in a 4-block area. And the people who owned those houses were okay with that. Okay? Our kids came along and they were playing in a fenced-in backyard with a 6-foot brick wall around it, and we were checking on them every 10 minutes to be sure they were okay. These kids need to know in adulthood that they are in a safe environment because they have been raised in a situation that was always saying to them, we've got to watch out for your safety. We've got to watch out for your safety. That's one thing. Another is that my friends and I had jobs by the time we were 12 or 13. We were out of very poor families. Everybody went to work at some kind of job at 12 or 13 to help meet the family's expenses. Most of the jobs I had growing up, you would go to jail if you gave to a child today, because I was operating very dangerous equipment. I was running an asphalt pot when I was 15 years age, that the asphalt was 500 degrees. And I'm, pulling asphalt out of that pot and running it up a pulley system to the guys on the roof who were mopping it. And some of the people mopping it up there were 17 and 18-year-olds. Like I said, we have become so protective of children at the same time that we are maybe over-responding to the threats that are there, that this is not a group of young people who had the experience growing up that my generation took for granted. That you're going to have 2 or 3 jobs. You're going to have mean bosses. You were going to do some jobs you didn't like doing, but it was the only way you were going to put bread on the table this week. If you didn't figure out how to get the job done, whether you like the boss or not. They just haven't had a lot of the life experiences we've had. And so we've got to help the older generation put itself in the shoes of someone who has grown up in the last 20 to 40 years in a world completely different from the world that they grew up in, and how that shapes a limitation in how they can, in the resources they have to deal with what jobs are going to throw at them. And at that point, that's where your term coaching came in a while ago, very appropriately. We have to see ourselves as coaches and mentors to these young people rather than their bosses and supervisors. And if we can shift the metaphor to being a coach and a mentor to that generation rather than their critics or their second guessers or their boss, then we'll begin to relate to them, and they will open up to us because they respond well when someone is genuinely interested in them.
Man, that's great. That's real good stuff, Mike. Thank you so much, man. I see here Yolanda says, how do you confront negative behavior in the workplace? Because all it takes is one for everyone to join that behavior.
Well, first of all, you don't reward it. You get more of what you reward. But we have to become somewhat sophisticated in the way we analyze problems with our workers in the workplace. A person who has negative behavior is motivated to have negative behavior because they think it's getting them something or it's helping them avoid something. Motivation basically boils down to one of 3 things, and fundamentally only 2 things. I'm motivated either to achieve something, or I'm motivated to avoid something, or sometimes I'm motivated to destroy something. Okay. So we move toward, we move away from, or we move against. And one of the problems in our political arena today is that there's a lot of moving against rather than sitting down and having dialogue and meaningful discussion. But for the most part, in the lion's share of the times, people's behavior is coming because they're either wanting to move away from something or they're wanting to move towards something. Some people who are troublemakers are doing it simply because it's a way to get attention. We see that in kids in school. the misbehaviors are often people who don't get much attention at home or much attention in their peer group. And this is a way to get their attention, get the attention of authority figures or someone else. But on the other hand, many people who are negative in their behavior is because deep inside they are afraid something will happen that they're trying to avoid, trying to preclude. And so their negative behavior is part of them moving away from something. We've got to be in dialogue with them in a genuine listening mode long enough to figure out, is this behavior triggered by something they're wanting to move toward or something they want to move away from? And then find more constructive ways for them to accomplish that goal. If we just tell them, quit behaving that way, but we don't equip them with tools to either get what they're looking for or to avoid what they're trying to get away from, there won't be any drive on their part to change their behavior. So it takes some listening to figure out what's the underlying motivation here. Which direction is it moving? Is it, I don't want this to happen, or I want that to happen? And why is that important to you? Why is it important that you get that? Or why is it important to you that not happen? Okay, now let's talk about some other ways you might be able to get that. And we sort of lead them in a coaching conversation through to seeing other possibilities that they have not properly considered. Now, that's a terribly simplistic answer to a very good question, but it summarizes the strategy that in some more sophisticated ways than I've just outlined, we ultimately have to fall back on if we're not just going to terminate the bad apple that we've got in the barrel.
There you go. That's what I was waiting on. That's what I'm waiting on, because this is what I'm like, wait a minute. We must be talking about somebody that's very valuable to this company, because you're not going to come here with this negativity and think that you're going to stay here.
Right.
I can't see that. I mean, unless this got to be somebody that's very important to this company. Because
I actually ran into that once in the C-suite.
Mm.
I ran into a guy who was so good in the technology of the industry. He was a pain to work with, but the board would not tolerate anyone thinking about firing him because the competition would scoop him up in a moment. And so he continued to be a thorn in the side of everybody in leadership because they weren't about to let him go and let the competition get him in their camp. So you're right. And the fact of the matter is, realistically, despite the idealism of what I just said, realistically, companies have a very narrow time frame in which they have to turn around bad behavior. Sometimes we can do it. Sometimes we can't. Because if we're dealing with character flaws, going back to our discussion of character, it takes a while for people to overcome ingrained bad habits. And sometimes the company just doesn't have that time. And it's not a negative judgment against the value of that individual or that person as a figure of worth to say, you're not a fit here. You are you're a square peg trying to go into a round hole. This doesn't work. And I've had to let some go for that very reason. So I give my advice, but at the same time, I've had to deal with reality. And the reality sometimes is I don't have time to coach this one. This one's got to go find the sidewalk.
Yolanda's saying, oh my God, that's literally my situation. She had a pain to work with. And I don't know. I'm kind of old school. Well, I grew up in a house with my dad was old school. He didn't care. So I'm under you get what your hands called for. You start trouble. You doing this. I had to pay. My dad he was fair. When you did good. He rewarded you. But when you did not.
Well, and go back to what I started my comment with, that you do have to exercise accountability.
Exactly. That's right.
You want to get to the root of the problem behavior and see if you can turn it around. but you do not sacrifice accountability while trying to get to the root cause. You do have to hold them accountable, because once one person is not being held accountable, 3 or 4 other people are going to test your mettle on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what was that? I think that's what somebody said here. It said it only takes one for everyone to join that behavior. And that's right, because you let them get away with it. Next thing you know, somebody else said, well, you let him go. So next thing you know, you got it's out of control. Is there anyone else? Anyone else have a question? Because I'm going to take you somewhere else, Mike. I got something here, and I don't know if we're going to go ahead, because you wrote something here, and I'm going to read this, and because it was really good stuff, and I'm going to let you go into this. We may not get all the way into it. We may have to hold some of it for the next show, but I want to go ahead in this. You have wrote, Mike, that most leadership advice treats symptoms telling you to communicate better, be more strategic, or build better culture, as if these were separate, disconnected skills to master. But exceptional leadership isn't about juggling 100 different competencies. It's about understanding the interplay of 5 fundamental principles. When they are developed sequentially and executed correctly, the result is a cascade of positive outcomes across your entire organization. The 5 are, in fact, an interactive system of leadership priorities. You wrote that, Mike. And I don't even know how far you can get into this. The five that you're talking about are, and I'll let you go from here.
Well, number 1 is what we've been talking about thus far, and that is exemplify extraordinary character. And the word exemplify is key there. We lead by example. Einstein even said, we only lead by example. He said, example isn't a way to lead, it's the only way to lead.
Wow.
And one of the reasons for that is that we as human beings are prone to imitate others. How do we learn the way we go at life as youngsters? We see our dad do things a certain way. We see our playmates do things a certain way. And I like this and I like that. And so I begin to imitate them. And I become, as a result, an amalgam of the good things that I've tried to imitate from other people. I'm that as a professional speaker. I mean, I've spent all these years doing keynote addresses to large and small audiences. But along the way, I've seen some people who did things, paced things, framed things in certain ways. And I thought, man, that's good. And I took some of that. But then a week later, I'm taking something from somebody else. And they become blended uniquely in the filter of my personality. But who I am when I stand before an audience is an amalgam of people that I am imitating. When you stop and think about it, if you're ever in a situation where you're not sure what to do, I ran into this all the time overseas when they would set a local dish down in front of me, and I would have no idea what it was. I therefore have no idea, how do I eat this? Is it a finger food? Is it a fork food? Do I need to pick up my knife? What do I do with this? What do you do when you find yourself in a situation like that? You start looking around the room for somebody who seems to know the ropes. You watch what they do, and then you imitate them. You follow their example. So we develop new raw abilities by imitating other people. And if we're trying to develop people of character in our organization, we as leaders have to exemplify it. So the first thing is exemplify extraordinary character, not run-of-the-mill character, extraordinary character.
That's right.
And then what we were talking about in our previous episodes, once people have confidence in my character, they will then be more prone to trust me. In a day in which we are skeptical of leadership, skeptical of anyone in authority, skeptical of institutions. Our default position is increasingly don't trust them until they prove themselves. And so if I see character in the way that my leader or my leaders are handling situations, I will begin to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to yielding my trust to them and on their behalf. And then once we have trust running in the organization, we can begin to align that organization. People will follow our lead in changing the way things are aligned so that we can assure ourselves that everything is being aligned in accordance with our vision, our values, and our strategies. Because unless we are consciously staying on top of the alignment of our organization, it starts to get frayed around the edges. People start doing this over here on the side and that over there on the side. And before long, it's very difficult to see that we are focused on a clearly aligned approach to what we have said on paper we are committed to doing. And then once people are aligned, they're in the right place. I've got the right people doing the right things at the right time in the right places. But now that I need their output. And so now I have to inspire them and motivate them in the way that I engage them. This is where the people side of it becomes very strong, because I'm trying to engage them in such a way that I not only motivate them, I inspire them. And that's why vision has to precede this, because vision gives us an aspiration, and there is no inspiration without aspiration. People do not find themselves inspired to do something that they don't aspire to. But if you can build a strong sense of aspiration, it's amazing the things that can inspire them to do in terms of creativity, in terms of collaboration, in terms of going the second and third extra miles. And then once you've got those things going, you've got alignment and you've got motivation and inspiration going, you've laid a pretty good foundation on which you can do the fifth thing, and that is to build a culture that mandates excellence of itself. Excellence isn't imposed on it. These are people who want to do the job well, who want to see this thing succeed, and they will police one another and set standards of excellence that are enforced by the natural peer group within the organization, rather than it being something management is imposing from the top. And it's real interesting when you get into excellence, because everybody talks about it. Something like 8 out of 10 companies in the United States have excellence as one of their core values. So if we're that committed to core value, why is there so much mediocrity? If you stop and think about it, we live in a world where there's a lot of mediocrity, but 8 out of 10 companies say excellence is a core value. I put that question to a C-suite in a manufacturing company about 10 years ago, because they had excellence as a core value. And we were doing a long-term strategic planning exercise. And I said, really, excellence is a core value? How much mediocrity do you have in this organization? And so we got into this interesting conversation about that. And so I said, well, how would you define excellence? And one by one, they took a stab at it. The CEO, who was an introvert's introvert, was seated right beside me, and typical of an introvert, he just sat there and listened and said nothing for about 10 or 12 minutes. And then he finally spoke up and shared what was going on deep in that reflection. And he said, excellence boils down to 4 things: doing it better today than we did it yesterday, doing it better today than we've ever done it before, doing it better today than our competition thinks possible, and doing it better today than we once thought possible ourselves. I just stole that. I mean, I couldn't find any better way to operationalize what it means to perform with excellence.
Yes, that's
But
great.
a culture that demands excellence of itself will just do those kinds of things naturally. And he had an organization where those things were being done naturally on the manufacturing floor. And so that's why he understood the dynamics so well.
Wow. Wow, that's great stuff right there. For lack of time, for the sake of time, Danielle, it's always a blessing and a pleasure to have you here. I saw your hand up. I saw your hand, and we're going to take your question before we go anywhere. And I just want to encourage you guys before she answers her question, man, to come back next week. Mike is back with us next week. We're going to finish this thing up. We're going to continue on into this leadership discussion we're having. Stay on. After this show, we have another show. We have a new guest, Neil Fishman, the CPA. You guys stay on here. It's going to be interesting. Get your pad and pens out. You're going to learn some stuff about your taxes. Some stuff I need to know. But right now, Danielle, I saw your hand.
Thank you.
I know you have an interesting question for Mike.
So, Mike, a lot of you're talking about is really great because as a therapist, mental health therapist and stuff, some of the things you're talking about is how we outsource to mirror what we're learning. And we talk about attachment theory. Mm-hmm. How much have you looked into that as a way to work with that work culture and the leadership styles that you are trying to emulate and to progress with the success? Because I don't know about you, but I've never seen a healthy attachment style. We learn from our parents. We're not blamed for it, but we're learning from each other. And right. How are we aware of that mistake until it's mirrored to us or exposed to us? Because a lot of times when we go into a job, just even on the down floor, or even to the top of the rung, we're, as you said, we're creating the patterns that we're observing from other people. How do we correct that course if we don't have that resource?
It's one of the reasons that accountability groups have become so big and so popular among the executives who are serious about going to the top and doing a good job. Mastermind groups, accountability groups, where there is a quality of relationship in which people can honestly provide feedback to one another on our blind spots. And the way that I frame those kinds of conversations with groups to make it safer for them to be open about the blind spots that people point out to them is that the mentor who did more to shape me than anyone else over the 40 years that he befriended me and just continually plied me with the wisdom that he had built up as someone 30 years my senior. One of the things he said 100 times, if he said it once, is we all have a flat side on our wheel somewhere. The sooner we recognize that flat side and build people and systems around us to compensate for it, the sooner we will be successful and the more successful we will be. I've come to believe that's one of the most profound pieces of wisdom that I've ever encountered. Because a lot of time what therapy is about, and I've got a background in pastoral counseling, so in fact, I've taught pastoral counseling at the graduate level. So, I've been in those weeds too. But that one of the things in pastoral counseling is that we focus on trying to get that flat side rounded out. Therapy has the time to work on things like that. Executive life doesn't give you that kind of time. You're on a short leash to prove yourself and to get the bottom line results the board's looking for. So if I can approach it by saying, I want to be in a dialogue group where people are pointing out to me where my flat sides are and help me come up with strategies to build systems and people around me to compensate for that. Now I've got a collaborative community that is helping me be more effective than I could otherwise be if I were self-directing. And the whole environment in that accountability group is one of, we are very open and honest about our flat sides. And we help one another develop strategies to overcome the limitations that would otherwise cap their potential as a leader. Does that answer your question appropriately, or is there some dimension of it that I've failed to take into account?
No, I think for the audience, that is what it needed to be.
What's that?
I said for the audience listening, that is what they needed to hear. It needed to be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your
listen, you guys, man. The panel. I want to thank you guys. The panel, Mike. I thank you. You're a blessing. We love you. We love what you bring, and what you bring every week, man. And I can't wait. I'm anxious to hear next week. You guys, my panel. But you guys, I love you guys, man. You guys keep coming, man. Keep coming. We're gonna keep on bringing these guys, bringing Mike back, and people like Mike, and we want to let your voice be heard. I want to hear it. So you guys continue to come and be with us. I'll see you guys, Mike. I'll see you next week, and I love you guys. You guys stay on. We have another show coming. This your boy now.
Hey! Step in, lean in, mic on, and begin. Hey! Been quiet too long, chewed up tongue, turned down songs, clock keeps ticking on the wall, but your name's still missing from the roll call. Let your voice be heard, say every single word, from the low notes to the sky, throw hands up high. Let your voice be heard, loud, clear, undeterred. If it shakes the room, that's how you know it's you, yeah. Oh, yeah. You got a truth tucked deep in your chest, heartbeat tapping out, say it, confess. Crowd might stare, let them do what they do. They never held a fire living in you. Let your voice be heard, say every single word.